Have you heard that National Treasury has convinced Parliament to introduce a bewildering new Twin Peaks system for financial services regulation in South Africa? The financial services sector comprises two sectors, banks and insurance. Each sector has had their own regulatory authority for well over 100 years. In other words, banks currently have a single regulator or peak, and insurers currently have a single regulator or peak. That is, they each have one master for all matters that affect them. The current single peak system proved 100% effective throughout the 2008 financial crisis and proved 100% effective in dealing with the handful of cases of market abuse. Under the proposed experimental Twin Peaks system, each sector will now have two separate and independent masters, together with a bewildering array of committees, laws, and ministers. Exactly the same two peaks will control both banks and insurers. This short video illustrates that Twin Peaks is the most complex and expensive regulatory experiment in the history of the country. It is clearly doomed. Twin Peaks is a complex and therefore massively expensive bureaucratic system that will cost consumers a minimum of 4.8 billion rand per year every year. That's equivalent to approximately 500,000 RDP homes or 5,000 new clinics per year every year. Compliance costs are always carried by consumers. Treasury's experimental system will raise the price of financial services, which particularly impacts the vulnerable and the poor. In addition, this complexity will act as a barrier to emerging players in the financial sector. No attempt has been made by Treasury to show what is wrong with the current simple single peak system. No empirical research has been done to show what problem exists which needs addressing, how extensive it is, or even whether there is a problem at all. In addition, Treasury has not bothered to outline the measurable benefits of the new Twin Peaks idea. The new system will not achieve any practical outcome. Let's look at the current structure or architecture for the regulation of banks in South Africa. The South African Reserve Bank appoints the Registrar of Banks, who has oversight over licensing, reporting, and financial soundness for all banks. Now let's look at the current structure or architecture for the regulation of insurers in South Africa. The Financial Services Board, or FSB, is an autonomous organization which was brought about by a separate Act of Parliament in 1990. The FSB appoints the registrar, who has oversight over licensing, conduct, enforcement, redress, reporting, and financial soundness for all insurance companies. The current structure of regulation of financial services in South Africa is simple, easy to manage, and easy to understand. Everyone knows where to go when dealing with their matters. The regulatory hierarchy is clear. The current single peak architecture comprises one regulator each, one department each, one financial sector board each, and one policy setting body each. Now let's look at what is to come in terms of the Financial Sector Regulation Bill, the FSRB, better known as Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks has been sold to Parliament as having been designed to defragment the regulation of financial services in South Africa. Let us see just how defragmented the new architecture is to be. Twin Peaks proposes to simultaneously involve no less than 3 cabinet ministers in financial services regulation: the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Trade and Industry, and believe it or not, the Minister of Health. The minister and their staff will serve on the Financial Sector Interministerial Council, or FSIC. Twin Peaks is in fact a fragmented, multi-layered structure that looks more like a pyramid or Ponzi scheme than a legitimate regulatory agency. The Twin Peaks are the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, or FSCA, and the Prudential Authority, or PA. The Twin Peaks have divided up between them this list of regulatory items with notable overlapping. So under Peak 1, the Financial Services Conduct Authority controls the conduct of banks and insurers in respect of licensing, conduct, enforcement, redress, and reporting. And under Peak 2, the Prudential Authority controls the solvency of banks and insurers in respect of licensing, conduct, enforcement, redress, reporting, and financial soundness. As you can see, there is considerable overlap between the roles of the two independent peaks, this overlap being the central cause of the complexity which now follows. The Financial Sector Interministerial Council will be an overarching committee whose role includes trying to manage the Twin Peaks and the conflicting overlapping activity between them. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority will report directly to the Minister of Finance, while the Prudential Authority will report to the South African Reserve Bank, which is independent of the Minister of Finance. But wait, there's more. The Twin Peaks are created and managed by a highly complex structure. The Twin Peaks are managed by and directed by no less than 7 committees, commissioners, governors, and the like, each of whom has the power to effectively direct or at least derail the other. The FSRB creates an inscrutable mishmash of cross-reference committees, boards, panels, tribunals, forums, officials, and regulators. The Executive Committee, the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners, the Sub-Executive Committees, the Prudential Authority Oversight Committee, the Prudential Committee, the Governor, Deputy Governors, Chief Executive, the subcommittees, all of whom will want to ensure their influence is felt. So the Twin Peak regulators will actually have many masters of their own. But it doesn't end there. Each of the 7 committees, commissioners, governors, and the like that direct their own peak will give direction to the other peak. The Twin Peaks authorities are required to further consult with the following committees and forums: the Financial Stability Oversight Committee, the Financial Sector Contingency Forum, the Financial System Council of Regulators. These committees include the influence, direction, and control of the other 2 ministers, that is, the Minister of Trade and Industry and the Minister of Health. The Minister of Trade and Industry, after dealing with the Financial Sector Interministerial Council, will appoint, regulate, and control the National Consumer Commission, the Competition Commission, and the National Credit Regulator, all of whom will have representation on the FSOC, the FSCF, and the FSCR. The Minister of Health, however, through his Council for Medical Schemes, will have representation not only on the Financial Sector Interministerial Council, but will appoint Council for Medical Scheme representatives to the Financial System Council of Regulators. Also serving on the FSOC, the FSCF, and the FSCR will be representatives of the Financial Intelligence Center, who themselves report to the Minister of Finance. Should any crisis occur, then in terms of the FSRB, a new coordinating committee must be formed. The Administrative Action Committee, which will take administrative action against the source of the crisis, if any. So, it is clear that the Twin Peaks authorities in fact have no authority to act on their own and must act subject to their own oversight committees and the oversight policy committees to which they belong. The FSOC, the FSCF, and the FSCR, prior to making any final decisions with regard to the actions of either Peak 1 or Peak 2. If you thought this was complex, wait, there's more. To make matters even more complex, in the event you understand what is going on at this stage, a new Ombuds board will be formed together with a tribunal and appeals panel. They will be called into being in order to constitute a new Ombud Regulatory Council, or ORC. The ORC will now take responsibility for the currently independent and voluntary the Ombudsman for short-term insurance, the Ombudsman for long-term insurance, the Ombud for financial advisory and intermediary services, the Ombudsman for Banking Services, the Pension Fund Adjudicator, the Credit Ombudsman, all of whom will report via the ORC to the Minister of Finance, but will give no input to the oversight and contingency committees that are formed under the Twin Peaks authorities. The proposed Twin Peaks architecture comprises 3 cabinet ministers, finance, trade and industry and health, 3 government departments, Treasury, trade and industry and health, 4 financial sector councils or committees, the FSCF, FSCR, the FSIC, and the FSOC. 4 financial services supervisors, the CMS, the FSCM, the NCR, and the PA. 9 regulation setting bodies, the CC, CMS, FIC, FSCA, FSOC, NCC, NCR, ORC, and PA, and the 20 Acts of Parliament with an additional 4 new acts proposed. The Banks Act 94 of 1990, the Collective Investment Schemes Control Act 46 of 2002, the Consumer Protection Act, the Credit Rating Services Act, the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, the Financial Institutions Protection of Funds Act, the Financial Intelligence Center Act, the Financial Markets Act, the Financial Sector Regulation Act, the Financial Supervision of the Road Accident Fund Act, the Friendly Societies Act, the Insurance Act, the Long-Term Insurance Act, the National Credit Act, the Pension Fund Act, the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, the Promotion of Access to Information Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act, the Short-Term Insurance Act, the South African Reserve Bank Act. The proposed new acts are the Conduct of Financial Institutions Act, the Financial Markets Act, the Financial Sector Levies Act, the Resolution, Insolvency and Business Rescue for Financial Institutions Act. This is not Twin Peaks at all. It is multiple peaks and sub-peaks. It is an inscrutable, highly fragmented structure. Compared to the current structure, it is almost indecipherably complex, highly inefficient, and massively expensive. Already the finance sector is inundated daily with interpretive notes, directives, board, notices, regulations, rules, and standards. Twin Peaks promises more of the same. It is an administrative system with no clear benefits. Indeed, Treasury's own impact assessment lists no measured problem to solve and no measurable benefit to be achieved. But wait, there's more. The money bill that now accompanies the FSRB makes no provision for the constitutionally required budget and appropriation bill to be passed by Parliament, thereby rendering the entire Twin Peaks bill illegal. The question to be asked is why? Why this hopelessly inefficient, grossly expensive system? Why no properly researched problem? Why no properly stated benefits? Is it worth 500,000 new homes or 5,000 new clinics every year? Or is it just another way of capturing funds for bloated bureaucratic adventures? Whilst you are pondering on these questions, consider some of the bewildering array of committees, forums, laws and institutions brought by or referred to in the FSRB. The Minister of Finance must be called upon to withdraw this Twin Peaks bill immediately.